All right, so it's 7:02. We have a quorum and we're going to start the meeting. So the meeting will be called to order. Roll call.
Carl Humble.
Susan Cahalan.
Leah Whiting.
Bob Sweet, acting chairman.
Poor computer.
Huh?
Your poor computer.
Good and welfare of good and welfare for the public. I see we have a couple of people in the audience. We just seeing what the concept, Boy Scout. So you're checking out what a public meeting is all about?
Citizenship in the Community Merit Badge.
That's the one.
Well, welcome.
Cool.
Yeah, you picked a good one. Anybody online? Nobody online? All right, so item number 4, notice of intent, 27 Pleasant Street, DEP number 2180860. Anybody have any questions, comments?
Red Lobben asked to continue the meetings. We don't have comments from GSP yet.
Can I get a motion to continue?
I'm making a motion to continue. Item number 4, 27 Pleasant Street, DEP number 218/0860.
All in favor?
I second the motion.
Just a second.
All right. All in favor? Any comments, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Bob, aye.
Aye. Susan, I.
Leah,
Since we don't have anyone online, we can
we
do.
don't
the
have to
voice
do roll
vote.
call.
Okay, so motion passes unanimously. So item agenda number 5, notice of intent, 29 Pleasant Street, P number 2180861.
I make a motion to continue the public hearing for, this is 27 or 29.
29.
Okay, DEP number 218-0867 to the next meeting.
861. I second.
Oh, 0861, sorry, I have glasses. I'm blind, even with my glasses
Second.
on.
I just said.
So the motion's been made and seconded. Any questions, comments?
None.
Well, we're
Do
supposed
we have
to-
comments?
All in favor?
All in favor, say aye.
Then you say opposed.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion passes unanimously. Item number 6, request for determination of applicability, 133 North Ave, Mendon, number 25-001.
I make a motion to continue the public hearing for 133 North Avenue until April 10th. That number is MEM number 25-001.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any comments, questions?
Yes. The reason why this is, they've asked for a delay and I agreed to it is in our Isabella and I wrote up a document that you reviewed last meeting where we asked them to provide additional evidence for specific documents. It specifically stated that in order to prepare the stormwater management report, that would be because of the work done in their large parking lot, that they needed the additional time.
Okay. So I take, let's see, what was it again?
Can I just, I want to confirm, they asked for more time because they needed more time to do more storm calculations because of the large area. The parking lot.
So there had been no stormwater calculations yet. So Sean Reardon, the PE from Tetra Tech, has been out. He went out this week I talked with Terry Fayad, who's managing, so he said Sean was out this week. And we'll work on the report, so they wanted to continue to April 10th, and they'll have everything in at the beginning of that Monday, so we'll have it for the week to review.
Good, that's good.
I did see somebody walking around back there, but I'm not sure. It seemed like a young person. Maybe field tech.
You ask if there's any further discussion, wait through, you go, you think to yourself,
Mississippi to Mississippi to
right,
Mississippi.
and then if nobody says anything, then you say, all in favor.
Is there any further, see, I'm new at this too.
I know, right?
Any further discussion?
I'd like.
Okay, no further discussion, so we'll take a vote. Roll call vote?
No, we don't need a roll call, because we still have everyone here. He's just our select board liaison, he's not a voting member.
Okay, so take a vote on continuing the public hearing.
Coffin high.
Leah, aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Motion passes
No,
unanimously.
you have to ask for the nays.
Oh. Any nays? No nays, motion passes unanimously.
You have the gavel. Where's your gavel?
Afraid of,
Oh, Peter has the gavel.
I like that thing.
okay, so,
Here, Pat.
so much pressure up here.
Yeah, that's, aren't you glad you get to do it when there's no, you don't have lawyers in front of you?
Nora, I can handle Nora.
All right, so, item agenda number 7, notice of intent, 35 Taft Ave, DE number 218 TBD.
Right. Good evening, everybody.
Hi.
Gregory Buckingham, the owner, 35 Taft Avenue. Just coming forward with the notice of intent. We kind of, yes, bring up to speed the current backyard situation. There's been a dock that is a aluminum removable dock. It's actually been in the backyard from previous ownership. I don't believe it was permitted when I bought the property. There was no record of it, so I'm here kind of before you to kind of hopefully do the right thing and permit it, and have it reviewed and everything like that. It is a removable dock. Nothing is permanent on the actual dock or the fixation to the ground or anything like that. It's seasonal, goes in typically around April in the spring, comes out about October in the fall, and gets stored off of the wetland area, in the backyard for the winter. There's also, in proximity to the dock, there's also kind of the edge of the property, which is kind of that yellow triangle that you see on the plan there, is kind of an area of like beach sand. It's relatively flat, so it's not, a steep drop like the rest of the property kind of further up is. The elevation there is pretty relatively flat. And then the dock is kind of being shown in gray, and the water line, shoreline kind of is that blue line crossing through. The property is 60 feet of frontage, basically on Nipmuc Pond. The dock relatively comes off of the property about 80 feet, although the first section kind of sits actually on the sand to be able to actually step onto. So the projection into the water is probably more like about 68 feet, if you minus that first 12-foot section of dock, as it's shown on the plan. Each section, like I said, is aluminum. It's kind of like a four, almost like a table, basically has 4 legs, aluminum legs that just sit down into the water with kind of a base plate. So nothing really, when we put it in and take it out, we don't alter the ground or the water base at all. It just kind of, they're all kind of self-leveling with like a hydraulic bolt that we just kind of, from the top, you just kind of crank it and you can go up and down and kind of stay level with the natural bottom of the pond. So,
And they get lifted up by 4 people on one corner? They're light enough to do by hand, or how?
actually 2 of us. Yep. 2 of us.
Sounds like a floater.
Yeah,
Yeah, they, for the most part, they.
like a naughty boy.
Yep. It's a
We're ocean
relatively light. Each section, like the first 2, 3, 4, 5 sections of 12 footers, and then all the other ones are 10 footers. And then it sits relatively about 2 feet up out of the water. The height of the water, it sits out of the water, so it doesn't actually even float on the water. It's out of the water about 2 feet. And at the end of the dock, further as it projects into the water table at that elevation is about 3 feet because we stand when we bring it in and the water's, up to our waist or our chest at worst, depending on the season and stuff like that. So, I don't suspect with the water being so shallow from that, first 70 feet or so back to the shoreline that there would be any kind of boats or anything crossing, that close to the shoreline. I think by boat laws, it's close to the shoreline anyways.
That was one of my questions.
Yeah.
Being, 60 feet out there.
Yeah.
But-
I think with how shallow it is, and I think, I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what the boat rights are or the right of ways are, but there's a certain distance off the shoreline they're supposed to be as well.
Boats, I think it's 100 feet.
Is it 100 feet? Yeah. The only other thing that I know too, or I could say that we're in compliance with is according to, I think it's the DEP waterways, they have 600. I want to say maximum area,
Right.
and we're at 528. So the total area of that entire gray area that's representing the dock sections comes out to 528. So it's under the 600 threshold. I don't know what you have to do if it goes over 600, but we're under that. So I think that hopefully that's a good thing.
Not that big of a lake.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about this? Are you gonna talk about the sand? Because that's the
Yeah.
only thing that I'm somewhat concerned with.
Yeah, but
So the sand, again, both the sand and the dock, I kind of inherited from buying the property with the backyard was this way. As you probably remember, I was just here for the house, the reconstruction of the house. So when I reconstructed the house, I'd never touched the backyard. So these are some photos of how it existed for the past couple of years. The one thing that, actually, before I jump to the sand, just to wrap up on the dock, is
Sure.
on that photo, you'll notice that the dock is kind of more to the right side, how we're facing it more to the right side of the property. I know DEP, I sent them this drawing and they came back with that they preferred, or they commented about moving into the center of the
So
property.
it doesn't
Makes
stick too
sense.
far out. Yeah.
Yeah, so I should be able to do that. I've never done it. I've never, so I don't know, like if there's rocks or something, I've never really, put the dock in that position, but I can certainly try this summer and see how it works out. It's just always been, if you go back on Google, the old pictures and things like that, you'll see it's just always been in that spot. So I just always put it in the same spot, but with it being movable and removable and level, able to level, I can certainly try and move it around and get it closer to the center.
So nothing actually holds that to the banking?
Nope.
Well, it's gotta be on here. What stops it from floating away?
Just the
So-
posts?
Yeah, so they're basically the post, I mean, that end that's sitting on the sand, that's just sitting on the sand. And I think the weight of that just sitting there kind of has always kept it in place. And each one of the sections, they do interlock. So I think that also holds, so many of them together, kind of gives it its rigidness, but I've never,
The last year or something on.
I was just gonna say well, sometimes we do get white caps and we get those 50-mile-an-hour winds and I've never had a problem with it ever letting
Been like
loose
that
or
for
letting
2
go.
weeks.
So it's not stuck in the ground anywhere?
No.
Oh,
I have a quick question.
I think just the way that they all click together keeps it pretty, the engineering behind it is pretty, I'm pretty impressed by the company that makes them. I was pretty impressed of how they click together and everything. So it does kind of stay put in that sense.
I have a question. How old is the dock? Do you know?
Um,
Because you mentioned hydraulic pistons or whatnot to,
yeah.
it probably jacks up in the winter. Is it one of those?
No, so the hydraulic piston that, I don't know if I should be word hydraulic, it's basically like a threaded rod
Mhm.
that allows it to go up and down. So it's just like.
So it's no fluid filled
No,
containers?
yeah,
Okay, that was my big question.
Like that, yeah. So I
Okay.
probably shouldn't have said hydraulic. It's a threaded rod that the bolt kind of, goes up and down as you twist it, and then that allows it to just go up and down.
Okay.
So it's not hydraulic like a car lift. It's just like, it's more like the same way like a basketball hoop goes up and down when they have the crank and just kind of is going around. It's threaded rod. So that's what the posts are made of.
Is that the neighbor's dock on the other side of you?
Yes.
ooh, that's gonna be close if you move it.
Yeah, that's why I've always kind of, like, I think we both have just always kind of gone lean more to the right, just naturally. The other thing is it's also, the water is a little bit deeper as you go to the right. As you go to the left, it's even more shallower. So you might end up that, you know, like when I go to the end, I'm at about 3 feet. And if you're further to the left, you might only be a foot or two of depth of water. So it might not, the dock might not even work, kind of being so shallow.
Well, his dock looks like it's a lot shallower than yours. I think that's why DEP might be saying, can you move it over? Because then it pulls it back into shore.
Back in, yeah.
DEP wants a 20-foot setback from the property line.
Front side.
Okay.
Or if it's not a lot that has enough room for 20 feet in the middle.
And that was the thing I was gonna mention, so I have, if I do put it in the middle, which I will try to do, I do end up with 19 feet on each side, it's just. It's close to 20, but I can't really get the exact 20 with going to 60 feet and the length of the docks, you know, how they don't make them in those size sections, I'd have to lose 10 feet.
I have a
Kill that whole way up.
It's probably unrelated, but maybe not. What kind of boats do they allow on that pond? And like,
Any boat you want. There's no
Really?
Limits of,
There's no
you don't want a big deep propeller because you're gonna hit some rocks. But I don't think
Well, not
there's
only
limits
that,
for
but-
motor, you can put a 200, I don't think there's any limits.
you know, ripping up some Bethnic habitat, not just for, you know, the applicant, but for everyone.
We don't have a public launch though, so
Oh, okay.
unless you have a property that you can drive the boat into,
Mhm.
can't get a boat in
I
there.
was just curious.
I have a boat. Is that a picture from last year?
Yes, yeah, that was, I believe that was last year, that was just when we got the grass,
Great.
put in, yeah. That was
Okay.
last year photo.
And I appreciate you bought it from the owner, and so, as you said, you bought it, and I guess it's been stored there. My question was the beach.
Mhm.
Because I'm looking there and I see beach sand, nice and white above, and then I'm seeing a line, and then I'm seeing dirty beach.
Yeah, so what I do with the beach sand, or what I've tried to do with the beach sand is kind of keep a little bit of, kind of like we were just saying, a little bit of a buffer between where the kind of called the muck is, and then where like the actual sand is where we go. So that way the sand doesn't just wash into the lake, basically. So I always try to keep the sand up, you know what I mean, on the
Well,
flat part.
That's a good thing, because I can't deny a homeowner, I guess, from putting a dock on. Would I be concerned if every 60-foot frontage has a dock? It might be an issue. But I do have a concern with beach sand and replenishment, and it's an ongoing thing. It's not kind of like it's a once and done thing.
Right.
So where is the limits? And in essence, we're allowing filling the lake, right? Because it's not going to go anywhere else except down into the stream.
What does DEP say? Isabella,
They haven't yet.
oh,
They haven't given their comments yet. It's tough because a lot of these beaches are pre-existing on Lake Nipmuc. A lot of lakes don't allow
Really
private
old.
beaches.
Okay.
So we're a little stuck because
So
Where
you
we
have a
are.
beach, and they all have beaches, and they all grow up, and they'll grow into weeds unless they're maintained. Or they have to be replenished with sand, because there's no sand coming out, not like the ocean that's gonna be bringing. So I don't see that if there was a beach, that you have a grandfather right for a beach. I see it as a matter of bringing in fill. And, so, yeah, you can have a beach and you can, you know,
That's a
like
good
the old
point,
lawn,
because-
but there's a buffer, and
here's the
so.
thing, why do you need more beach sand? Because where did it go?
Yeah, well, it gets in, it gets dirty, and it's not as aesthetically.
Yeah.
appealing,
Yeah,
so.
I mean, it gets compacted down over time too, and then it kind of comes a little bit back to life sometime, but
And
sometimes
please
it
don't-
does just get denser and denser, and you get a little bit of freshening up. I mean, that's basically, that's why I'm here. I'm trying to say, you know, or come before you and say, you know, what can I do? What are you gonna allow me to do? How often can I replenish the sand? I mean, I'm open to whatever the board would like,
Okay.
you would like me to do. If you put an ordinance in that says I cannot replenish it every year, it's every 2 years or 3 years, I'm happy to comply, but I just want, I guess, to,
Better to ask.
yeah, I just
Although
want
it
to have
looks like
something
you're-
in place, just
It's like you're already
going
putting
forward. I
something down,
just,
but.
I don't want to, be trying to replenish it and then have, you know,
What do you-
problems, so.
What do you plan about doing about the muck?
I just kind of leave it to kind of let that, like I said, let the nice sand kind of stay up where we sit, as you can see, and then I let the muck kind of do its thing, like. along
Thank
the
you.
shore.
That's the right answer.
Yeah.
You didn't.
And that's why you can see it from that photo, because if you try to, bring the sand obviously closer to the water, it's just gonna go in, like you said, and then, not that it's about money, but as much as it's impacting the water, going into the water, I'm also throwing away money too, because the sand is not free too. So I wanna, if I'm buying the sand and I'm putting it there for our enjoyment, I wanna maintain it for our enjoyment and not give it to the pond.
Greg, I have a question. You said that you wanted to be, well, you said you would end up by being 19 feet off each side. Is the lakeside only 40 feet wide? But you said it was 60.
60, yeah.
Right, so that would put you at 28 feet on a 4-foot wide dock.
Yeah, on the straight part of the dock, but I've got a little bit of a U shape at the end of the platform.
Oh, okay.
So the
You have to
width of
account
that
for that.
platform is about 20 feet, because it's a 10-foot section going sideways.
And then 2 4s.
So you're 100% okay, it's at the shoreline, I'm well over the 20-foot limitation, but as I get out, because of the U shape.
And you want to be able to get by the side to get into the left side of your property, right?
Exactly.
Okay. No, I'm all about math, so
Yep.
the numbers didn't add up.
Oh, you're 100% right. I was looking at it at the worst case scenario, outward, but yes, at the shoreline, we're definitely.
And I think if you look at the chapter 90, paperwork, I think this is every 3 years and it has to be only a certain amount per lot size.
Okay.
So you can look into that.
Okay, I did calculate, I think what you're seeing is kind of a frankly looking sand of the muck area. I think it calculates up to about 600 square feet in that area.
How many yards did you bring in?
Well, it's probably not 60 feet wide, right? It's not 100 feet long.
Right, so it's 60 and then it's about, I think,
30,
about
40
20 to the dock at that furthest point, and then it kind of comes to like a triangle almost at the left side. I think I calculated.
1,200 square feet. 6 times 2 is 12.
But then it's divided in half
So
because it's a
that's
triangle, so I did like some.
I don't know if it's quite a triangle.
It's close to it, so I did that, the 20 feet by the 60 feet, so I did 20 by 60 and I divided by.
We'll
60.
call it a wedge, Bob.
Yeah.
A wedge, which is still a triangle, but yeah.
Yeah, I used the, what is it, the right triangle theory?
I don't think it's a right triangle. Well,
Anyways, we got a little off topic. It just, like I said, I mean, because you can put 2 inches of sand or you can put 8 inches of sand.
That's true too, yeah.
So that matters.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I'm just wanna kind of do what's right and what I'm allowed to, so.
I'm thankful that you came in, you asked for your permit, you're trying to do everything the right way without being chased down, so. That I appreciate.
We'll be chasing them down if they don't come in. My expectation is that sometime in the next 2 or 3 years, we will have a police officer in a police boat with a little rotating ball. And he will go around and take an observation from the lake of who has a dock and we'll compare it to who has permits. So you're our, test case and we get to work through the process and figure out what the state regulations are and work with you on the beach sand. And then we can have our Lake association liaison go out and warn everybody else that we're going to be looking at their beach one.
Well, the nice part is you're talking to the president of the lake.
And Mr. Chair, that's my only concern, and it's setting a precedent. And so if we let him have a beach, the whole 60, what's the saying? Stopping anybody and everybody from saying, hey, let him have a beach. So.
And that's where we look at the ecologically sensitive areas of the lake. And for example, the outflow or you're not in the cove up by Old Tafton, but that would be my response, that we're going to take each lot on a case by case basis.
Okay, and then my response is the impact to the lake. I don't see some spots being more
Yeah.
endangered than others.
Yeah.
it's kind of a holistic look.
Yes.
So are there more critical codes? I could be convinced, but I don't.
Say the,
I was gonna say, I mean, it probably has a lot to do with various elevations too, right? So where I am, it's relatively flat, as you can see in that photo, so rain and runoff is a little less likely, probably, or less powerful.
That would be,
But some of the other higher up elevations, like on the whole other side where the grand view is, it's higher up and you've got properties more on a hill, that might, impact the flow of sand into the.
my issue with shoreline on the lake, and we're not gonna get it on this split so much, is shade, for the bank.
Yeah.
Which is necessary for fish to. And that whole north side, you're not getting it, or I don't know if there are any trees.
We also have to be careful.
All right, I think we're getting a little off topic here. He is here.
Yep.
It is continued and, it's about a dock.
No,
More
it's
so
not
than-
beach, it's sand restoration, but yes, I'll set it up.
Thank you. With that being said,
Make a motion to continue the public hearing for 35 Taft.
I second it.
any other comments, questions?
No.
Then we'll,
Then you just say all in favor.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any objections?
Opposed.
Any opposed? The motion passes
Unanimously. Yeah.
unanimously.
then hopefully we'll
Yeah.
get the DEP file number and comments in the next 2 weeks, and then.
I'm back on the 27th.
And thank you for noting the distinction between close. I like your attitude.
All right, so additional topics not discussed. Item agenda number 8. Greg, have a good night.
Good night.
Um,
Thank you.
Mendon Wetlands Bylaw Protection Bylaw. View and discuss draft changes to the Mendon Wetlands Protection Bylaw, chapter 28 of Mendon General Bylaws.
Okay.
So huge turnout of people who care about the bylaw, but,
Really? Are you being serious?
yeah.
Is this, can we deal with that?
Yeah, citizenship in the community, merit badge. So I'll give an introduction. Have you taken, are you working on the citizenship in the USA? And okay, so you understand the federal system where you have the federal government and then the state government. In addition to those 2 layers, the town of Mendon has additional laws, which are called bylaws. So what we're now going to be discussing is the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, has regulations on what people can do in terms of water and pollution and conservation and stuff like that. For the most part, unless it's a very large site, and there are places where people do have to report to the federal EPA. But for the most part, the Conservation Commission is involved in the state law. There's a State Wetlands Protection Act, and the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, which we call Mass DEP, has come up with regulations. And they say what people are allowed and not allowed to do in wetlands areas, and they define what a wetland is and stuff like that. The Massachusetts law allows for individual communities, if they want to apply a stricter standard than the state law. The state law says you can't go and move dirt, dig, impact a wetlands area. One of the things that we adopted in Mendon about a decade ago was a bylaw which says you have to have we have restrictions on what you can do within 100 feet of a wetlands. And if someone wants to do work in a wetlands area, then they would have to come in and go through the permitting process, which is defined in the Massachusetts regulations. The things that we had at the beginning of the meeting where people were going for notices of intents, those are places where people are building houses or doing farm work within 100 feet of a wetlands area. And so they come to us with an engineering plan, we have discussions with them, and the purpose of what we're doing tonight with looking at an update to it, the Mendon bylaw was created by a woman who was very involved in community preservation. And what she did is she took the Upton wetlands bylaw and Uxbridge and Bellingham and sort of mushed them all together. And that mushing together shows in that there are some inconsistencies. We have a conservation agent, and what she's done is she's gone through and worked and adopted a model bylaw that the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions has come up with. And we're proposing to replace the existing bylaw with this one. In addition, there are 3 specific topics that we were going to be discussing in addition to adopting the model which cleans up the inconsistencies. The first one is to add a provision that says that when someone wants to come to us for an RDA application, request for determination of applicability, they have to notify the abutters. And that would give the neighbors a chance to come in and listen to the person's presentation and speak for or against what the commission would be deciding to do at that point. The second and third thing that we would be discussing are kind of related. The Massachusetts statute and regulations say there are 2 kinds of streams. There's a kind of stream which runs all year round, which is called perennial. And then there's this kind of stream which dries up during part of the year, which is called an intermittent stream. Usually, it's confusing because we've been in a very severe drought since September, but if you think back to previous years, there are streams which pretty much dry up during the summer months, but then they come back again in the winter and in the fall and in the spring. The same kind of thing happens with a vernal pool. A vernal pool is a pool that shows up in the vernal season, which it means the springtime. Vernal pools are very important because that's where amphibians grow. A frog or other amphibian will lay their eggs in the water. As the vernal pool dries up, that's what convinces them to become amphibians and start breathing the air. Right now, we only protect intermittent streams. We only ask people to do permitting within 100 feet of an intermittent stream. We ask people to do permitting within 100 feet of a vernal pool habitat. So the topics that the General Bylaw Review Commission and the Conservation Agent and I are asking the Commission to think about is whether to adopt those suggested changes. So I'd like to start out by talking about abutter notification. The reason not to include abutter notification is that it is an added expense to the person who's submitting the application. They have to go and get a list from the town clerk of who or the town assessor, I forget which, of who the assessors are. Then they have to go to the post office and mail them out. And that's, all that postage. Yeah, so that you get the green card saying that the person signed for it and they did know that they got the letter. The reason for adding a abutter notification is because when someone is asking for an RDA, they're asking for an agreement, the committee to agree that the home improvement work they're doing on their lot is not going to impact the wetlands. If we allow if abutters are notified that they're going to be coming and talking to us, they may want to come in and say, hey, wait, no, I disagree. I feel strongly that the work they're planning on doing is going to impact the wetlands, so you shouldn't issue an RDA. Right now, they would have no way of knowing that unless they're like me and they read every single agenda that that the town mails out for all of the meetings.
Is this just for RDAs or NOIs or?
We already have NOIs requiring.
So the Wetland Protection Act requires a butter notification for NOIs. A lot of communities require it for RDAs and ANRADs as well. So I have the language up here too.
What page is that on? Is it on?
On the 8th page, I don't know if yours are numbered, but so any person filing an application, NOI or RDA or ANRAD request with Concom at the same time shall give written notice thereof, certified mail. Term receipt requested formally and delivered to all abutters at the mailing addresses shown on the most recent applicable announcements. Other thing is, most abutters are notified within 100 feet for the Wetland Protection Act. Some bylaws will require 300 feet. So that's another thing to discuss if we want to increase the radius.
Yeah.
Okay, so what, have you gotten any feedback, people talking to you in the office about the RDA requirement?
No.
Okay,
I think it's beneficial because you might get an RDA and the neighbor starts excavating and then neighbors don't know. And
I
then they
agree.
call the office and freak out.
Yeah.
I
100
think we
feet's
could-
not much, so I agree with the 300.
I do too, and I think that it's gonna actually help us because we're not gonna have issues after the fact. We'll be able to stop damage before it's done.
Isn't it my interpretation of an RDA is to request for whether or not you need to file a notice of intent?
Yeah.
So,
Part of it.
so I have 70 abutters, okay? If I file an RDA and I have to do that,
$700.
that's a lot of money.
which is
If-
why we're
if-
having this
If
conversation.
it's determined that you need an NOI, then by all means, I understand the spending the money. But if it's determined that you don't need an NOI because you're not within the wetlands, you just spent $700. Find that out.
And you're gonna have to spend the same 700 when you go to the NOI, if it comes to that, right? Have you repeated?
So that, I mean, that's my feeling of that is that puts a big burden on people trying to do the right thing. What may come about that is you find people are gonna be like, I'm just gonna take my chances. So,
That you don't need one,
what's that?
that you don't need to file an RDA.
That they're gonna gamble and go, I'm gonna do it anyway and not even say anything. But I feel
Oh,
like,
I think that we will have a object lesson coming before us in a couple of weeks of what happens if you go and do making a road and filling it in and landscaping and then get caught. That's going to be a very expensive lesson. So yes, I view this as the town is growing up. When Mendon had 1,500 to 2,500, even 3,000 people, the Conservation Commission that I joined 7-8 years ago very explicitly did not want to unduly burden homeowners by requiring them to fill out a lot of paperwork. But now that Mendon is up above 5,000 people, now that we're getting giant warehouse projects, Kevin Meehan is now doing very large projects as opposed to the ones he's done in the past. I think that we just have to accept that we're growing up, and having a professional paid staff who is now available to investigate reports from homeowners of, hey, I think someone's trying to do something on the cheap, on the sly. We're just stepping up, and the way I put it is we're going kicking and screaming into the 21st century.
But how does that change an RDA? An RDA, I mean, a large scale project like that has to file. So they're not going to have an RDA.
We have an example of someone filing an RDA instead of an NOI,
Because he's a farm.
right?
That's a whole different ballgame.
And like Mr. Meehan, on Hastings Street, he did an RDA because.
He did an ANRAD, he did an ANRAD first.
An NRAD, and then each one of those would, so I don't see the significant advantage of increasing a notice for an NRAD or though on the flip side, expanding it to 300 feet, I think would address the issue of bringing in more awareness to the community without cranking your 30 abutters. If you cranked it to 300, you're not going to get 60 abutters. You're just going to pick up another one or two more. So,
A lot size is only 200 feet. Your neighbor can have a wetland on his and it's gonna be on yours.
You mean frontage?
Yeah, yeah,
You said lot size.
well. So if your lot is 200 feet wide, your neighbor's wetlands affect you at that point.
yeah, so you should get a notice that your neighbor's going to be messing with this one. And that you have an opportunity to come. And even if you're not an immediate neighbor, but you're 200 feet away, you're not going to get a notification because you're more than 100 feet away.
Are we talking about a neighbor about a notification or the person that's doing the work?
Peter is saying that increasing, so right now when you get on a butters list, it does the radius of 100 feet.
Oh.
So if you wanted to increase it to
okay.
300 feet, you might catch like a few more properties. It's not gonna be a ton more, but you might have someone on the diagonal that's technically outside of the 100-foot.
I thought it was up 300 already.
It wasn't, at least wasn't defined. The assessor might give you.
The last one I did, it was 300.
The assessor might give you 300, but based on like what zoning and other planning board and those abutter, like locally what the other boards are doing, but the Wetland Protection Act itself says 100 feet.
Okay. And Mendon's bylaw says what? 100 or 300?
It wasn't specified.
Okay.
Standard.
Okay, so that's where the confusion came in for me then.
I think what we have to think about when we're thinking about these bylaws is that we're here to protect the wetlands. We're here to make sure that our natural resources are protected. And because we're ever growing this town, we're going to be encroaching more on those areas. So this is our chance now to protect those natural resources by making some key changes to the bylaws that will help us as a Conservation Commission protect things better.
I'd agree with you. I'd say it's a political, got past town meeting. And I like to think that there's a consensus in town to protect the wetlands, but there's going to be some pushback. And I would much rather have us expanding it to the intermittent streams as opposed to further notification of RDA and. Because the arguments are going to be expensive. It's going to be the argument he does right.
Maybe we just have to pick and choose the ones that are going to protect the most.
Well, that's right. And I'm picking and choosing. And I'm saying, for me, it's more important to pick up the intermittent streams, and it's not as important notification of RDA. So I would.
So here's a question. If we pick up the intermittent streams, does that mean if we follow the Riverfront Act, that means a homeowner can't use 200 feet of his property along that river?
No.
Because it's 100 feet on each side.
We
That's
don't
no
let them
disturb. And then it's 10% after that. Am I wrong?
No, the Rivers Act protects the first 100 feet. And
On each side, doesn't it?
so 100 feet of the stream and then out 200 feet where you can do the alteration, but there's different ways you can so you could say you want jurisdiction over 200 feet from an intermittent stream. And so if you have a house within 200 feet of an intermittent stream, you get a permit. You can put in, when we go to our regulations, you can say, single family homes that are pre-existing can still do work with following the 25 no disturb, 50-foot no build. We can build the regulations in ways that people want them to work you can do similar things to the Rivers Act with the 10% alteration in the 100 to 200 foot only for new construction. Saying that all streams are gonna be treated as rivers eliminates like
We waste a lot of time here on this topic.
like if someone's gonna push their project a year, 2 years, or 3 years, and wait for that river to run dry. You know, maybe the intermittent stream suddenly becomes a river 10 years from now, and like, you might not want someone in the flood zone of an intermittent stream have their house closer because they said it was an intermittent stream and they could. And maybe they should have been set back 100 feet minimum.
There's not much prime land in Mendon anymore. A lot of rocks and swamps.
But Bob,
Yep.
I think the answer to your question.
Exactly.
If it's a small one and it's narrow, and if the stream's going right up the middle, and you're concerned that there's 100 feet on one side, 100 feet on the other, says no build, I don't think we can allow us to deprive a homeowner from building on the land.
That's where the regulations come in after we update the bylaw.
Yeah, but they should do
Right.
their due
So-
diligence.
You can put a driveway in here or push the house here, but can't stop somebody from enjoying.
But Bob made a good point. There's not a lot of good land left in Mendon. There's a reason why we're here to protect that.
The only thing that I see with this and if you got somebody that has a 1,000-foot long property and there's a river that runs through it, that's 2,000 feet of area that they can't use.
Maybe they shouldn't build there in the
That's
first
not,
place.
that's not, this is what Isabella was trying to say. When we craft what we're doing is we're saying within 200 feet, you have to come, you are within the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission and you must get it permitted. That's all that raising it from 100 to 200 does. When we create specific regulations, then we can say between 0 and 25, this happens. Between 25 and 50, this happens. Between 50 and 100, this happens. Between the brand new 100 to 200, here is what the restrictions are going to be, and here are the hoops we want you to jump through. So we haven't written that part of the regulations the way we have the 25 no disturb, 50-foot, 100-foot.
Okay.
So like you can
So-
have. Like Sudbury has a few categories of streams. They have intermittent streams that run dry only 5 days. Whereas intermittent streams that run dry longer than 30 days.
Right,
So
that's
you
what
can
we
have
have right
different
now.
categories,
It has to be 3 days or something like that, right?
4 days in a row dry.
Right.
And that's what gets you out of but we
River.
say. Yeah. So there's different ways you can put it in the regulations, but I think we're not saying 100-foot no disturb, 200-foot no disturb. Just because we have jurisdiction, we're just saying you have a stream. No matter what stream you have. And you're working within 200 feet, you need a permit.
Okay.
So they can't
Well,
say like,
then that's how you're gonna have to do a lot of framework in front of town meeting because anybody that hears that, any builder that hears that is gonna be like, are you kidding me? I'm getting killed on taxes and now you don't want me to build on my land?
You're right, Bob. We should be well prepared to say what sort of thing we're gonna be looking for in that 100 feet.
it is gonna increase the amount of permits.
What feedback have you gotten so far?
That it'll increase the number of permits.
Yeah.
Not so much, I think,
But
same thing if, I think different towns do it differently. So there's always some changes, I think. We have some internal intermittent streams in wetlands. So then you'd have the 100-foot buffer zone to the wetlands and a 200-foot riverfront area. So we will need to do a higher amount of review to understand what resource areas people have. More staff time, more input from the commission.
I have a quick comment.
Yeah.
Is there a way to categorize like, the streams, like whatnot, these like, if you're endangered, cold water fishery, then you're gonna be stricter there versus, or full or fine drainage ditch, like, for example, there's one in Needham that runs along the railroad tracks and it's like 50 feet down and it's like not a real stream, it's artificially created, sort of a thing, or whatnot, and,
Cold water fishery is always gonna be a perennial stream.
right.
So we're not talking about that.
Oh, okay.
Here's-
Just
here's-
intermittent.
Here's my input on making things more complex. When we make something more complex, it's going to cost money. It's going to cost the town money because we have Isabella and maybe we hire another person who works under Isabella to actually go out and look at things, and maybe we engage a specialist who can do flagging for us. And it is also going to get more expensive for the people making applications because we are going to start peer reviewing them. What'll happen, and the way it gets to be very expensive to do a development, is someone comes to us with the plan and they say, yep, I got a wetlands, I flagged it. We may have our staff go out there and say, you know what? I think there's an intermittent stream in the middle of it and you suddenly have to worry about 200 feet instead of 100 feet. And they go, and we force them to pay for a outside peer reviewer who goes and does that investigation and tells them whether they have to do that or not. Again, this is us moving into the 21st century. We're now going to be starting to ask people homeowners to start spending more money in order to develop their property. So that is the framework that town meeting is going to be looking at when they decide whether or not to accept these extensions to our current jurisdiction.
And I'll just read, so the language, which is right in the jurisdiction section, is, so it, section 2G says any land within 200 feet of perennial streams or rivers known as the riverfront area. And then MACC's model language is optional additional protection for intermittent streams. In some communities, it may be reasonable to extend 200-foot riverfront area protection to intermittent streams, brooks, and creeks. To do so, delete the word perennial and insert words whether perennial or intermittent. And so we don't talk about it again in the bylaw. We'd be talking about it again in our regulations. So we're not saying intermittent streams have to follow the Rivers Act. We're not saying it, 100-foot no disturb and work in the 100 and 200 with the 10% max. We're just saying all streams will have the 200-foot riverfront area.
This is what I'll say, and it won't go over well, and I know that.
Don't make me
Is-
say this is the Conservation Commission, please.
What I heard was the goal is to increase the amount of permits.
No, that's going to be the consequence.
The goal is to increase your jurisdiction. We will see more permits.
Protection.
You're increasing protection, but you're doing so. You're getting more workload. More people will have to get permits when sometimes they don't have to right now.
Well,
I
guess
just,
what,
unfortunately, house building is so expensive.
Yep.
And to keep just pulling pennies out of people's pockets. Just,
So we're our natural resources.
I hear and I share Bob's concerns, and then the words are important to me. So in this, it may be reasonable to extend the 200 riverfront area protection to intermittent streams. I would say it's very reasonable to extend the 200 riverfront area jurisdiction, but that doesn't give it whatever the riverfront area protection is. I think what Carl, you were suggesting is that there might be something less than a thou shalt not, because it's a major river and deserving of more protection. That in intermittent, you still have the opportunity to comment on stuff going on within 200 feet, but you still got to let the landowner do what's reasonable, right? So it just opens up more area to be discussed.
I have a,
Which is,
I apologize.
I have a quick
You know,
comment.
Being the squeaky wheel, but.
No,
No, I-
oh, let's get it.
I would hear it too, because I think it is more, and that may be reasonable for some communities, you know, Boston or Cambridge or Easton, where they're super built out and they don't have many streams left. Maybe they have to protect their 200-foot area for floods and different
Yeah.
things, whereas we have streams all over the place.
And
And
rock.
it may be too much.
By definition, a perennial stream, I mean, a intermittent stream doesn't have that kind of water flow. It dries up, means it's seasonal water. It's either heavy rains, which, yes, we have been getting more, but that means it would turn into a river.
Well, I have a quick question about the intermittent stream designation, like, it needs to be officially stated as such by a regulatory authority. At the state level, nothing will happen.
Well, where's, here would be my question, it's on the USGS, so where's it?
That's what I'm talking
begin?
about, yeah.
Where the channel begins to form? How does this one define?
Stream begins in the Wetland Protection Act when it leaves a wetland.
Mhm.
If it goes into a wetland, an intermittent stream is not protectable in the Wetland Protection Act.
Okay.
which
The
would,
bylaw says intermittent streams are always protected. So wherever you get a channel of a bank in a wetland, in our bylaw would be considered a stream.
So where's the first flag go? Where the channel is first defined?
That's what I would say.
this became an issue for the Hastings Street project, the golf course place that we reviewed on an ANRAD 5 years ago before you were on the board. And the scientist from Goddard very specifically said, yep, this channel here from the house is not jurisdictional for Concom because of exactly that reason. You're upstream of a wetlands area. So that's an example of something that we would now be able to exercise jurisdiction over.
And then the question, how far up that ditch it headed to
Well,
get
yes.
jurisdiction or?
And that's where you force the applicant to spend money to hire a outside specialist.
But you could put in your regulations that agricultural ditches are always exempt.
Yep,
But to Susan's point of when is something intermittent, the state law has multiple kind of checkpoints you have to go through. It has to be dry for
It
4
does.
days.
Mhm.
And it can't be, typically if it shows up on the USGS map, it's always perennial.
Hmm.
Typically, if the drainage basin is larger than a quarter acre, it's always perennial. And the regulatory authority making the decision is the commission. So the commission could look at a stream, vote, say Springbrook is intermittent. Maybe DEP doesn't catch it. Now it's been deemed an intermittent stream. Springbrook is not an intermittent stream. And we have Providence Street Culvert with Tag and Bond, and they've designated it perennial. It's on USGS. It has a larger than a quarter acre. So even if something's dry for 4 days, there's a margin of error.
Right. Now, would it be prudent to extend the amount of days it needs to be dry?
You can increase it to
I mean, you
30
can
days.
increase it to 30, right? And that way there, I mean, June, July, and August, if it's dry then most likely it's not going to be a river.
Yeah, you can
Sunday.
strengthen your protection for intermittent streams just through the regulations and not put the 200-foot.
all right.
So I would be interested in hearing the language that wants to be crafted for, the regulations.
Okay, I've been listening to the feedback and I'm ready to do one of my usual things of making statements and then seeing whether people want to agree or disagree with it. The first one, going back to our first conversation about RDA notifications, the question that the General Bylaws Review Committee, wearing that hat, not Concom chair hat, the GBRC would like to work with Isabella on, do we present to town meeting a bylaw that includes abutter notifications for RDAs? I believe I'm hearing Bob saying that's a bad idea because it'll cost too much. And don't apologize for that perspective because we're going to hear it at town meeting as well. So how do other people on the commission feel about extending to 300? Peter, you said you don't feel strongly about it. You feel more strongly about other things.
If I was a gambling chip, that I would give away in order
Okay.
to get something that's more important and also it's gonna be problematic. So I'm just, yeah.
Okay, so how do you two feel?
I'm not indifferent, but I can see from both sides. I like what Peter says, is if we have to pick and choose our battles, we probably have a better battle somewhere else.
Okay,
Yeah, for the NRADs and the RDAs, I would say no, but for NOIs, yes.
well, NOIs are already that way. Okay,
So
so,
no, we want to crank it to 300.
Yeah,
well,
But the
now,
NOI, that I could see.
now I'll switch over to, okay, so the feedback I'm getting is it would be nice, but we're not going to die on that hill. And I will now tie that into my second question. The second question is, what do we want to do about increasing protection, increasing the distance requirement for intermittent streams, and by extension, the same conversation we'd be having about vernal pools? And here's my recommendation on what we do for that. We approve the bylaws at the May town meeting, sticking with 100 feet. And in the next year, we would work on crafting regulations that first clarify what happens to intermittent and vernal pools within that 100-foot area. And we go to town meeting at a follow-on meeting with a specific amendment to go from 100 to 200 or 300 or whatever. And at that time, we would have the regulations at saying, yes, you're going to have to get a permit from the Concom for up to 200 feet, but here is the regulations about what you would be allowed to do and not do. And I don't think we would be able to get that done by May. Well,
No,
actually
we should
by
be able to
April.
get it done by November now.
We would schedule it for a future town meeting, yes.
The November town meeting.
I
I'd like
don't know
to-
that
Carl, that's,
That's a good solution.
fine, but I would be against recommending bringing a bylaw to the town meeting multiple times, especially 2 years in a row. I don't think that's a great look. Cause then you might have someone veto the whole thing. But like, it's dangerous to bring the bylaw in.
It's harder the second time around.
Yeah,
well,
like now we've had it for 13 years. We want to bring some changes. You know, I mean, you can bring it again next year if you want to, but
Well, here's a question. If that's the case, should we just wait until the November one and then do everything at once? You'll have the time to pull the regulations together, have the feedback for the questions that undoubtedly will come for that. Like I said, you're gonna put 400 feet, 200 feet on each side of anybody's property. They're gonna have questions.
well, Carl, because that's what I was hoping that we could establish, and that we're not gonna come at two shots at this bylaw. We're gonna do the bylaw now, and we would include the intermittent streams to be given the jurisdiction, and then wait for us in our regulations to say what is allowable in that 200, which isn't a bylaw change.
And,
Yes.
okay,
Do that.
let me put on my hat as outraged citizen at town meeting. You are, the Conservation Commission is asking for the authority to meddle within 200 feet.
Yes.
But you're not going to tell me in May what you're going to allow me to do and not do within the 100 to 200 foot range.
I guess I would say come to our meeting as we work on those regulations, but the intent is not to have the absolute hard, strong protections of the riverfront. And you're right, gotta come up with language as to what we would be wanting to do. You gotta address those concerns sometimes, whether it's up front or, I don't know.
That's why I think it's better to come with a complete package rather than try to.
Okay,
I think that if we're gonna, I think that Optics are everything. If we go to town meeting in May and we look unorganized and half-assed, that's gonna read really bad to the public. If
Okay.
we're gonna do this and do it right, we have to be organized. It has to be 100% commitment. We have to be ready.
Okay,
Or-
let me put back on my Concom hat. How long do you think you would need to prepare regulations?
I still think that you should hire a scientist to come and write our regulations, and I don't think we're doing that for May. I think the reason we would want to have something passed in May is because there are holes in our bylaws that we want to straighten out, you know, procedurally with our permits and conditions, the way things are written, the way it says that we deposit our checks. And, you know, some of the other things, I feel like it's,
This is what I'll say.
like, I feel like we want to get this language in, whether or not we want to increase our jurisdiction to 100 to 200 feet.
And in terms.
I mean, we also don't have to decide tonight. We can think about it and come back in 2 weeks and make
Yes.
that decision.
And in terms of optics at town meeting, the way I would present it as either Concom chair or GBRC vice chair, depending, I would say, we are here now in May to adopt a bylaw which removes the inconsistencies and weirdnesses that have happened where people have come into the office and said, I don't know what to follow because you're contradicting yourself. We are in the process of doing a review of our internal regulations. And at a future town meeting, we will come back with a draft set of regulations.
Your regulations go through public hearing.
Right,
You don't go to town meeting.
right, but at a future town meeting, we would already have ready to go regulations that would say, when we get expanded jurisdiction, here is specifically what would be happening under that jurisdiction. So in that case, if we let people know ahead of time, this is to clean up inconsistencies, we'll come back at a future meeting to once we've done the specific work that we need to do.
Makes sense. Shows that you have a plan and it's staged out, based.
One thing that you need to be careful for is this. Do you remember when we did the age restricted multi-use development bylaw? And it got voted down and then they pulled out the town property and it passed? If you try to do things that are multi-layered, people aren't gonna wanna go for it. They're gonna wanna know what is there, all in front, all on the table up front.
Well, one,
The commission should have a final draft of what they want to change,
Right.
presented as a board together. And you're not saying, well, we kind of want to increase our jurisdiction on intermittent streams. You would hopefully come to the consensus we do, or we're not even gonna bring it up.
Well, this is my thought, my theory on that is, when you say we want to change the bylaw to include a 200-foot frontage on perennial as well as intermittent, these are the reasons why, and these are what's going to be, acceptable or the considerations that are in place. That right there takes all the guesswork out, it takes all the uneasiness out, and it takes all the questions away.
one of my statements I live by is, the best is the enemy of the good. The bylaws as now is causing problems for Isabella, the office piece, because people don't know what to do. I believe it's important that we get the model bylaw changed, which is what's written. And at least that happens, because that'll clean up a lot of administrative nonsense that's going on. The people at town meetings are going to get used to the GBRC doing that for the entire rest of the bylaws. We have a list of 12 other things that may or may not be on the warrant. We're going to be spreading them out over the next 2 years or so, where we're coming in and saying, you know what, this bylaw doesn't make sense anymore. Here's why. And so people in town are going to get used to a cadence where there'll be special, just like Ann Mazar shows up for the latest CPC stuff, people will get used to there being 15 minutes where people talk about updating the bylaws. For example, some of the fees and fines were set in 1960. There's a $25 fine for this, a $5 fine for that. So at some point, we'll go and say, inflation, we're now going to change all of the fees and fines. So I don't think it's that going to be, I think it's okay for us to go and say, we want to do the first cleanup pass here. We will be hiring a specialist. We'll be working with the Collins Foundation. We will be coming up with a plan to update the regulations and have public hearings on them. And we will then come in a future if what we want to conserve requires another bylaws change.
Well, I don't know if it's the best strategy to go to town meeting and say, we want to do this now, and we might come back and do this next year. I would just leave it off the table. If you're not doing it this year, I would bring it up.
And how much problem is that going to cause for you? In
Because
the
then
office?
someone might stand up and say, well, I want that, and put it in, and then you get an hour discussion and people get upset and don't want to vote on it at all. So I don't, like, if you're not putting it in for this year, I wouldn't introduce it as we're gonna come in the fall or next year and talk about it again. Cause then you might have someone say, well, put it in this year. And then you get a lot of back and forth, so. But I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, you know, we are looking at it for the first time tonight. I think there's a lot of science on why you might want 200 feet, but there's a lot we can do just with 100 feet. We don't have to have more.
And you said, Carl, that this is a 2-year process throughout all of the bylaws. I mean, if updating the fee structures and stuff like that is something that makes sense, then you're right, 100%, that makes sense. You go there in front of the board, in front of the town, and you say, we want to update the fee structures.
Yeah.
They haven't been changed in 60 years, 65.
We're also going to
So,
be
therefore,
gender
that-
neutral language.
Right, so therefore that people can get behind because it makes sense. To go there and say, we want to do this, but we're not ready for it, but we'll come back next year when we are, they're gonna say, well, then come back next year.
And I think that when I go into a meeting and I have to introduce things, that my thought is always, okay, where are the holes? Where are the loopholes? Where are they gonna pick me apart? Are we ready to be picked apart at that town meeting in May? I'm all for increasing the intermittent stream and 200 feet. I'm not totally 100%. I will support that, no, but I don't want to go there and have people picking us apart and not be ready for the scrutiny that we will get. And people, I like your plan, Carl, but I think people are going to be, they don't know us, they don't know what we have planned. I think they're going to be very apprehensive to vote for something that's not
Okay.
laid out in front of them.
But it has been.
Even our junior members saying, good idea.
It was in the public forum, it was on the website.
Okay. Well, there are two,
I know.
the options at this point are continue the discussion in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I
and
think
then-
that's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah. Because Isabella has a feeling for where we're going with this, and maybe she'll have some more thought.
I mean, I could send out, like Sudbury has a great example of the way they've set up their intermittent streams and stuff and regulations, but they don't even have the 200 feet for their intermittent streams. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. This was just what was in MACC's model. And again, it says maybe appropriate for communities. So I think Sudbury and Bellingham both have great regulations. Those are both in the bylaw folder.
Can we make a regulation that says this is how many feet, or does that have to be the bylaw?
You can't, so your regulations can't extend the jurisdiction
Okay,
further. So like you could say, we want 200 feet in the bylaw. And then your regulations say, we want 200 feet for all new single family houses. All pre-existing is still the 100 feet, or you could say you have design standards in the 200 feet, or, you know, there's a ton of ways you can do it. But again, we haven't adopted regulations. We could rush and adopt regulations prior to town meeting, but that's aggressive. all you have to do is advertise a public hearing. But it's like members want to review examples of regulations, so they better understand what we're maybe proposing. That I think that's, I don't know.
It's fair.
Whenever we go to town meeting, we just have to be ready for loopholes and what people are gonna pick us apart on.
Yep.
Because that, we'll lose confidence immediately as soon as that happens.
Worry about blowback laws and loopholes.
So it sounds,
But I think like the language that we're proposing is simple. Any land within 200 feet of perennial or intermittent streams
or vernal pools.
or vernal pools.
But in
Known
that,
as
in that
the
same
river.
token, now, if I read that right, we want to classify everything as a vernal pool. So anybody that has a depression in their property that isn't a lawn is a vernal pool.
No, it's got to hold X amount.
That, yeah.
It's got to be a
It's 200,000.
There's performance standards for defining a vernal pool.
200 square feet.
In addition to scientific definitions found in 310 CMAR, any confined basin or depression not occurring in existing lawns, gardens, landscaped areas, which holds water most for a minimum of 2 consecutive months in the spring or summer, consisting of at least 200 cubic feet. And this is all the language that's already in our thing, and then our bylaw. And then it says the boundary or resource area for vernal pools shall be 100 feet outward from the mean annual high water line. So again, you could say 200 feet there.
Right. But like I said, I mean, now that right now, as the bylaw stands, if I'm not mistaken, it has to be classified as vernal.
Vernal pool, whether or not it is certified by the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, is considered a vernal pool under our bylaw.
Today?
Yes.
Oh,
Bob, that puddle you have in your backyard? That's vernal.
It explicitly, the language that she just quoted out loud explicitly said the word lawn in it.
No,
It's in your laws.
Not occurring in any
Exactly.
depression not occurring in existing lawns, gardens, landscape areas that
Right.
holds water for minimum 2 months.
See, I make vernal pools.
So if you've got a lawn, you can't have a vernal pool in your lawn. And,
We might, but we're not gonna. assume
right, and
jurisdiction.
the other thing is, no homeowner, if I have a lawn, I'm not going to let it be sitting as a puddle of water for 2 months in a row without doing something about it,
Lawns.
Get rid of
or landscaping, well,
More vernal pools.
so what about
Landscape
wooded
areas.
wetlands?
We don't define that in our bylaw.
Because there's wooded wetlands out there that if, you know, in the spring, if there's a low point in, there's so much ledge in Mendon that water
That's still
has
a
to
vernal
seep
pool.
through the water and through the ledge. So the likelihood of
Lots of cracks.
it holding water is good. So when you get a wooded wetland, it very well could hold water that long. The trees still grow, they
Yep.
need the water.
That's called habitat.
The vernal pool is typically isolated, like you're saying, are all wooded wetlands, like vernal pools?
Under that, they are
There
No,
has to be a,
no, there are conditions.
200 cubic foot. So if you get something that's 100 feet around, it's how much, I'm trying to figure out what 200
the
cubic feet of
boundary of the
water.
resource area outward from the mean annual. So that's where you get the difference of a BBW and a vernal pool. Vernal pool will have a defined circle, and that's why we're calling it a vernal pool. So if it's connected to a wetland, free flowing around, maybe there's a stream in the wetland. Typically, when you're classifying something as a vernal pool, you see the brains of the topography in the pool on top of the neighboring wetland. And maybe next to it, so that's where, like, again, we're looking at higher levels of review.
Okay,
But that's, no language is changing in that section,
that's fine.
unless we want to say 200 feet out of the mean annual high water line.
I didn't realize Mendon was, because we have the vernal pool map.
But then nobody could certify every single vernal pool.
Right, and that's why usually the engineer has to do that, no?
Yes. And
Well, people like the certification because then it's aware to everyone that it's been designated a vernal pool. So if you're looking at the state map and your neighbor has a certified vernal pool, you know. Whereas if it's not certified, they might not know. So that's kind of where the certification comes in, and then it also helps the state track where certain animals are and stuff like that. But under our bylaw, we do protect current vernal pools, whether or not they're certified.
Right, okay. Which I'm perfectly fine with that. I mean, keeping turtles, frogs, salamanders, even predatory fish. They have a right to live here too.
Predatory fish are not.
But frogs are pretty predatory, so depending on the species,
and
so.
noisy.
But so then everything else is, really, as you can see in the green and red draft, is pretty much things we've had, just fixing the language. The only other proposed change in here,
Yes.
and some of it was a little too tough to like go in and change things. Security as part of a permit issued under the bylaw, in addition to any security required by other municipal or state board, the commission can require performance and observance of conditions imposed thereunder, but be secured wholly or partly by one of the methods below. So by a proper bond or deposit of money, negotiable securities or other undertaking financial responsibility to be released upon the issuance of a COC, or by accepting a conservation restriction, easement, or other covenant enforceable by law as recommended by town council. And so a security bond, for example, when the planning board does a subdivision, they'll take a bond for the completion of the road, because if a developer builds a couple of houses, then leaves, the town should finish that road for the property owners who may already be living there.
Already on the property.
But if we have a commercial project with an infiltration basin and stormwater basin, planning board doesn't take a bond on those, because if the private development doesn't get finished, that's not the town's concern. They can leave it as a half built or not finished.
Which
The
is
commission-
exactly what happened to 23 Cape Road for 40 years.
The commission could always go and take enforcement and sue and look for completion of the infiltration basin or removal of the basin if it's impacting wetlands, and that's an avenue, but becomes more costly for the town because we would need town council services and those kinds of things. Whereas if we had a bond, we can seize the bond, or they're more likely to finish the project because we're holding the bond.
Right, just like me up.
And I think even with a subdivision, there might be wetland replication or other road crossings with stream impacts and things like that, that the planning board engineer isn't assessing in the bond. So say again, the road doesn't get finished, we seize the bond to finish the road. The wetland replication may not be completed, and then we would have wanted to have required a larger sum with the planning. So a lot of towns will do this in coordination with the planning board. So say there is a wetland crossing and a stream, the planning board engineer determines the cost of the bond for the road. Our wetland scientist who's reviewing the project would propose the bond for the wetland replication area.
See,
And then-
I mean, that makes sense because that's really directed towards commercial development, large scale developments, which then doesn't punish the residents of the town.
Right.
And that's my whole, concern is the residents want to live here, but they don't want to be taxed out of here. And permit fees, it's just another tax. When I built my shop, I had a $3,000 building permit fee. The building inspector at the time, luckily he's no longer with us, went over to a cable and shook it and said, "You're all set." I said, "That's all you're gonna do? That cost me $3,000? Great."
But to talk about the fee, you can set your own fees. So say an intermittent stream. I mean, the public hearing notice is usually the same across the board, but if you want to file an RDA for working 150 feet stream, you can make the RDA fee lower.
Subject to the distance away.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways you can design
Right.
the regulation.
But see what I'm saying? These should be addressed before we go to town meeting. Because those are all gonna be questions.
You just can't adopt regulations for the 100 to 200 foot. I mean, I guess you could have them done, but you can't have those in place when you don't have jurisdiction yet. So like if you wanted to say, we're gonna have fees for the 100 to 200 foot of an intermittent stream and show the residents that we've already done it, but we don't have jurisdiction over that yet.
Or at least have answers to
Yeah.
it though. You know, and that's my whole
Instead of.
You know, theory behind this is there's gonna be questions, and any good lawyer will tell you, don't ask a question you don't have an answer to. So that's just my thought. But I do like the idea of the bylaws. I do like the idea that we're strengthening them. And I appreciate all the hard work that you're doing on the
Yeah,
bylaw review. I was on that
nice
committee. I know
job.
it's very
That's
challenging.
not fun.
Oh, I think it's lots of fun, which is why I volunteered for it.
So we're paper clips under nails. That's what it
Oh,
would be.
come on.
So can I ask that we revisit this at our next meeting? Because I think there are
Yes,
two other
and-
members on this committee who might have strong feelings.
and we don't need a motion for it since this is not actually, I think it's a public meeting notice. Do we need something because
It's
it's,
just a public meeting. so-
okay.
So do I have to make a motion to continue?
No, just say,
So we'll, once we're ready, the commission will make a motion to recommend it to town meeting.
Wait a minute.
We still have time, right? A couple of minutes to get.
We're at chair updates. but-
It
I
is-
think Is it closed today? So that's in there.
we have until April
Lost my pencil.
before we actually, there's an April deadline for the final language.
So
So
what date in April?
Okay.
I'd have to check my mail.
So we got one more meeting, whether we have two meetings.
Whenever the ballot has to go out, so that.
So I was gonna use some of my downtime next week to review some of the things. So I give you plenty of time.
So, agenda item number 9, updates, sheriff, conservation agent, like, who wants to go first? Chair?
Uh,
I got nothing to say.
I got nothing.
I attended the land use committee meeting and we had kind of an open forum for volunteer land use stewards. There were 4 or 5 residents who showed up.
Thanks.
Some other people who have responded to me and Anne directly. I think it was nice to meet some people who are active on our trails and learn. I think my takeaway out of it is I want to start using the Trail Care app, which is a way that volunteer land stewards or residents can say like, I walked on this trail and saw a down tree, or there's a lot of trash.
Land care,
It's called Trail Care.
trail care,
Trail Care.
to download it.
So Kurt Labuti looked into it further afterwards. I hadn't investigated it too much, but you can like print QR codes and we can put those up at all our trail kiosks so people.
Oh, that'd
can
be cool.
Sign
Yeah.
up when they go on walks. And then, so say you flag a down tree, then me or someone else can go out and cut the tree or find someone who can cut the tree. So I think it's nice. You know, we have a lot of acres, almost 1,500 acres of land and other people take care of it for us. So it's nice to see them and give recognition.
Does the town have to buy a license to get the QR code hooked into the app? I mean, I figured, how do they make their money?
Or,
Just data collection?
I don't know. Might be an app in the app.
Okay.
Did we make the app or was it already there?
So
There is an app. A lot of
Oh,
commissions will
okay,
use
gotcha.
it, but I think it's just I think it's just a QR code to the app.
Okay.
And then you like sign up.
Oh, right.
So I think there's general agreement, trail care app, yay. And if you get back to us, if there's anything that we need to get further involved with that.
And then, last night, the select board had the budget hearing for the conservation. We're looking to have the whole salary in the budget and not need the wetland account. Like we did, because we committed 15,000 for this year that's passed and then. So looking to have it fully funded in the general fund.
Good.
Moving forward.
And is that for 30 or 40 hours?
It's
You-
for 30 hours in conservation and 10 hours sustainability.
Right, okay, so
Energy. So I have 40 hours, you have a 30
we
hour
have
each.
30 hours, yep. Mhm. And I keep twisting Jeremy's arm saying, we need a clerk for all of the boards. Any movement on that?
I don't think for this year, but we are July 1st, gonna be inspectional services in that building, so. But they're gonna give Jack McClellan, the Board of Health Administrator, the title of inspectional services director. It would then be Board of Health, Planning, Zoning, Building, Conservation. As a department, right now I'm the department head, but I'm a one-person department, so. It's like silly that I get the same title.
It looks good on a resume.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's like, when we send out an email to department heads, really it should go to Jack and Jack relays it to the staff. And I think it'll bring us more together in that like every Monday we'll have department meetings. And we can review all the permits going through. Dylan is working on the floodplain bylaw, getting those reviews in, and there'll have to be someone designated as the floodplain administrator, but those permits have to go through everyone. Things like trailers and, ones that need department head sign offs and.
Well,
it'll
I
be
went to
nice
that
to be
lecture. I
functioning.
saw you way back there.
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
So, yeah, some changes in that sense, but I think it'll be nice, but yeah, that'll be July 1st, I think that changed.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, they're trying to bring Dylan on. The assistant town planner full-time as the town planner here. Jack Hunter's done as of April 1st in Mendon. And he's gonna stick in Uxbridge for a while to help them find a new planner. So Dylan is maybe gonna be 30 hours here, 8 hours in Millville. And keep that, but out of Uxbridge, so I think it'll be nice to have a full-time planner too.
Yeah,
Totally.
big help.
That's, yeah, so budget.
Okay, Lake Nipmuc Task Force, still not until April, and then we'll start that back up. And Land Use Committee,
She reported on the land use committee, so. No further news.
So we're also looking to have the annual town cleanup. In April.
beach cleanup or town?
Town. So looking to do the same thing.
Buy
Last year.
bags.
Yeah, maybe buy the bags. We might not have to. There was some left over. But Colleen, the health agent, would like to offer grabbers. And whether we
Pick up stick.
relay those out or give them to people, but
And
We
does
don't
the
want-
town agree to pick up the bags? How was that?
yeah, it picks up the bags. So we have an Excel sheet where people say what street they're gonna do. And then highway goes out and picks them up.
Nice.
And who would be in charge of that? Is that you? Who would be-
Board of Health is gonna be in charge. It's been a lot of usually volunteers, so Ann will organize. Last year, Custom Homes Realty, the real estate, they hosted the bags instead of having a town hall, but I think the Board of Health is gonna do it this year.
Good, excellent.
All right, item agenda number 10, review and approve minutes for February 27th, 2025.
And a whole lot of 2022s.
April 2022 through July 2022, November 10th, 22, November 17th, 22.
Do you want separate motions in these three separate motions here?
But I put the three, I just didn't know if we could lump sum.
Lump them all
So
together?
I mean, whatever. I put three as in case, but
I make a motion to accept the meetings for February 27th, 2025, the minutes from April 7th through July 28th, 2022, and the 5 sets of minutes from November 10th, 2022 to January 12th, 2023.
Second,
yeah, I'll note Carl gave a few word or grammar,
Changes.
a couple, there were like 2 or
Edits.
3, and then also he noted that the April minutes didn't have the DP number, so I did put those in this afternoon, which wouldn't be in the printout, but
they're in the SharePoint folder.
so I think
So
those changes were made, but they weren't significant.
All in favor of accepting the minutes as adjusted?
aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. No, any opposed?
I wasn't here for a lot of this, so.
Motion passes unanimously.
So I want to write some sort of letter on the letterhead, and then I might have you all sign it.
Oh, yeah,
so we
that'd
can
be
give
good.
it to the senior workers.
Yeah.
But the senior work-off program, they hit their cap for this year too, so we just finished. She finished them all just in time to get her hours in, so.
Oh, nice. Nice that we're caught up. All right, agenda number 11, good and welfare of the commission, for the commission.
Is this where I can say something?
Exactly. This is the right time.
Okay. I just wanted to have a discussion because we had a few meetings back. We had Fred in here for 27 and 29 Pleasant Street. And there are some endangered threatened species on that property. And I want to feel everyone out. It is public knowledge what animals, creatures live there. But I think as a conservation board, we should decide whether we want to say what is there or not. And like I said, it's public information, but it's different when it's in writing somewhere as opposed to everyone saying it in a meeting. And I'll just give an example. So if you're walking down the Grand Canyon and you find a good vein of gold, this is a good one for you, Susan. Do you go home and say, oh my gosh, everyone in a public meeting, I just found the hugest vein of gold?
Hell no, mine.
Okay. So it works the same when you find threatened endangered species, except for a couple of reasons. One, there are always going to be the people that want to go and find it and see it, maybe take a look. Two, there are the people that don't want them to be there and may destroy habitat. So I think it would be good for us as a commission to just either make it a rule, and granted, there may be times where it might be pertinent to say the name of the animal. All of us here have access to all the files that Isabella gives us. We can read the information, find out, hey, if you can't find it, Isabella can tell you what it's about or what creatures are here. But I think as a conservation commission, we probably don't want to be spouting out to the public where endangered species and threatened species live. So that's all I'm going to say. And I did ask NHESP about this and MACC. There aren't any laws, but as a commission, we can agree. Is this a regulation or what would we call it? To have a rule that we never say the name of the species that are listed.
Has anybody ever said the name in the past?
I think we stopped them before we do it, but we had a member who was very keen on making sure that we are able to say the name of the species.
I appreciate the concern. I don't quite catch the analogy with gold and endangered.
Okay, so maybe
But,
that was
but
my.
yeah, I understand.
I was trying.
However, I don't like to have my mouth shut when discussing something that is important. So you need to know what the species is as.
You
to-
do, right.
Right, so
Mhm.
I want to talk about it, and there's, if a species can move, it's not as opposed to.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Having a discussion on this matter is not on the agenda, so we need to stop doing this and then have Isabella put it on the agenda for a future meeting.
I did ask,
No, it's okay for you to raise an issue.
I asked for it to be put on the agenda.
Oh, okay. Okay, so next time, if you, when Isabella sends the agenda out and you don't see it, then call her up and say, please, hey, make sure you amend the agenda before
I did.
3:30.
Yeah, I saw the email from Ellen
She yelled at me.
today about the remote thing coming to an end, but it's like, well, what about special circumstances? Like I'm having a new.
No,
need
no, no,
put
no,
in
no.
Next week.
Hybrid is okay.
Oh.
What it would
Might
prohibit
be
is,
quorum in person, though, always.
what it would prohibit is what the GBRC is doing. We're online only. Because
Oh,
why should we go into an empty room and?
Gotcha.
Because we don't have any citizen participation for our
I think
meetings.
land use is like that too.
Could be.
I think so.
got it.
I-
Misinterpreted.
Typically, Ellen doesn't want to post amended agendas, which was why I didn't amend it yesterday afternoon. Except for under special circumstances, and it fell off my mind when I was writing this week. So I do remember you asking, but I forgot. And I just didn't. I thought maybe we were gonna write a policy we wanted to bring to the commission before we discussed it. So I don't know if we want to have something in writing that we put in.
It'd be useful to respond, improve the communication, so that you can respond to it, because I don't know how you put that into words, but I don't know. Because it's a policy, we don't really have policies.
The doc policy,
We what?
the doc policy.
Not policy.
But if we're gonna do a regulation, we need a public hearing. Which would be advertised.
Well, neither, he's not asking for a regulation.
I'm asking for us to agree on something, whether that is MACC says we can agree on it as a commission. Yeah,
So the question is, are you asking for us to agree on it internally or make it a public statement where nobody can speak of the critter involved?
I think probably both. Right? Well, because here's the thing,
Then it would have to go. in
if we're trying to protect these species, we don't want to, by the way, on 27 and 29 Pleasant Street, here's where this creature lives. So there are cases where we will probably have to cite specific things. But as a general rule, I think that at least in this meeting setting, if we can attempt to protect that, we should.
Yeah, I have no disagreement with it. It's just, I've never heard of anybody specifically stating the critter because nobody wants anybody to know what's on their property.
That too. Another
So
good point.
they certainly don't want to say, oh, I got a, three,
I have a golden goose
three-toed,
I have a
sloth
golden
on my-
goose on my property. Please don't come and steal it from me.
I just think the less we say about it in public, in an open meeting setting, it is public knowledge. Anyone who wants to know can do the research and, but I just think.
Isabella, here's a question. Does, even in the notice of intent on NHSPA, whatever they are, National
It
Heritage,
says it.
do they state
Yeah.
the
Yeah, they
animal?
Yes, that's
They do?
in scientific, in the scientific terms properly.
You just have to know the Latin names.
Yeah,
And if you
yes,
don't know, you
exactly.
just look it up.
Yeah, it's in the NH.
A lot of, unfortunately, a lot of people won't do that because they're too lazy.
If there's
Or they don't
notice of
have it.
intent or a determination letter from the state, those get recorded on the deed too. So it is public information.
One of those 5-second sound bites, people don't even know how to Google. You can
Yeah,
do it at least 50
definitely.
different ways and I can show, I have a spreadsheet. I mean, just for example, Scholar and Snap.
So it'll be on our agenda next meeting, perhaps.
Great,
This,
great, this will be fun next time.
Okay, then,
Yeah, where's the other two people?
let us continue to items not reasonably anticipated, yeah, that word, anticipated, 48 hours in advance of meeting. Nobody has anything?
I move, we adjourn.
The motion has been,
Have you
Uh,
ever endangered species?
how's that go?
Made and seconded.
Made and seconded, all those in favor of adjourning,
Hi.
any opposed?
Now you go.
Nah, I'm gonna stay here.
Yeah, we're out of here.